The Duke tore his wife's letter in half without reading it and announced that she would be sent away before dawn. Eleanor held his gaze, covered the secret beneath her cloak, and whispered, "I must leave now." For 6 years, she had managed Blackmere's failing farms, protected its tenants, and endured the private sorrow of a childless marriage. Tonight, she had come to tell her husband that sorrow was over. Instead, Julian Ashcombe, Duke of Blackmere, stood before the blazing hearth with the remains of her letter crushed in his fist. "You will leave for Hawthorne House," he said. "You may remain there until my solicitor completes the articles of separation." Lady Seraphina Vale watched from Julian's favourite chair, wearing the satisfied expression of a woman who had already measured the curtains for her new rooms. Around them, the Duke's steward, his cousin Lord Edwin Ashcombe, and 6 senior servants stood in rigid silence. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the ivory box hidden beneath her cloak. Inside, it was a certificate signed by Dr. Whitcomb, confirming what she had scarcely dared believe. After years of disappointment, she was nearly 12 weeks with child. The physician had warned her to avoid agitation, long journeys, and the mysterious tonic that had left her weak for months. Julian knew none of it. The letter he had destroyed contained only 4 lines. "I have news that concerns the future of Blackmere. Please meet me alone before dinner. What I must tell you cannot be entrusted to another person." "You could have read it," Eleanor said. "I have read enough of your deceptions." Lord Edwin stepped forward and placed 3 ledgers upon the desk. The missing rents are recorded in her Grace's own hand. Eleanor glanced at the open pages. The figures resembled hers, but the final totals had been altered. Money allocated for seed grain and winter coal now appeared to have vanished into unnamed private accounts. "I kept duplicate records," she said. "They are in the locked cabinet beside the estate office." Seraphina lowered her eyes with practiced sadness. The cabinet was empty when Edwin examined it. Eleanor turned toward Julian. "You allowed him to search my private records without asking me. You allowed him to meet a friend. You allowed him to search. You allowed him to search. I allowed him to uncover what you concealed." There it was, the moment he could still choose differently. Eleanor had expected anger, perhaps wounded pride, but not this cold determination to believe the worst of her. Julian knew she had spent 2 winters negotiating with creditors to keep Blackmere's tenants from eviction. He knew she had sold her mother's pearls to purchase seed after the northern fields flooded. He knew because he had once held her hands and promised never to forget what she had saved. "Give me until morning," she said. "Let me show you the receipts. Question the tenants. Speak to Mr. Bell, who witnessed every payment." Julian's jaw tightened. For one flickering instant, doubt crossed his face. Then Seraphina laid her hand upon his sleeve. "The longer this continues, the greater the danger to your name," she murmured. Julian looked at Eleanor and deliberately turned away from the doubt. "Your authority over Blackmere ends tonight. The household keys will pass to Lady Seraphina, and Edwin will assume control of the estate accounts." A housemaid near the door gave a frightened gasp. Eleanor understood why. Seraphina knew nothing of the tenants, the harvest contracts, or the estate's narrow line of credit. Edwin, meanwhile, had repeatedly urged Julian to sell the Western farms to a London investment company whose owners he refused to identify. Eleanor had prevented that sale twice. Now the 2 people who wanted her gone had been handed everything she had protected. Mrs. Finch, the elderly housekeeper, approached with tears in her eyes. A silver ring held the pantry, linen, wine cellar, medicine room, and household account keys. Eleanor had carried them since the morning after her wedding. She removed the ring from her belt and placed it in Seraphina's waiting palm. Seraphina smiled. "I shall try to repair what you have neglected. Begin with the eastern cottages," Eleanor replied quietly. 3 roofs are damaged, and snow will come within a fortnight." Seraphina's smile faltered. She had expected pleading, not instructions. Julian strode to the desk and signed the transfer of authority. His pen scratched across the paper with the finality of a lock turning. Eleanor felt a sudden tightening low in her abdomen. Fear cut through her grief. Dr. Whitcomb had warned her that the child was strong, but her own health remained fragile. She would not risk the life inside her by fighting men who had already decided that truth was inconvenient. She inclined her head. "Then, I shall depart immediately." "You will depart at dawn," Julian corrected. "No, I must leave now." Before anyone could stop her, Eleanor turned and walked from the drawing room. Only when the doors closed behind her did she allow one hand to press against her abdomen. "I will protect you," she whispered, "even from your father's choices." In her bedchamber, her trunks had already been opened. Dresses, letters, and personal papers lay scattered across the carpet. Someone had searched the room before Julian announced her exile. Eleanor crossed to the dressing table and withdrew the ivory box from beneath her cloak. Its tiny brass lock showed no damage, yet the lid shifted beneath her thumb. Unlocked. Her breath caught. She opened it. Dr. Whitcomb's certificate was gone. In its place rested a single black chess piece, a knight carved from polished ebony. Eleanor recognized it instantly. Lord Edwin carried a matching set in a leather case, and frightened tenants had mentioned finding black pieces on their doorsteps before he demanded payment for debts they did not owe. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Eleanor closed the box and slipped it into her traveling bag, just as the door handle began to turn. Through the narrowing gap beneath the door, she saw the shadow of a man standing motionless outside. Then a folded note slid across the floor. It contained only one sentence: "Leave Blackmere without speaking of the child, or neither of you will survive the journey." Eleanor stared at the sentence until the ink blurred before her eyes. Whoever had written it knew about the child. That knowledge was more dangerous than the threat itself, for only 3 people should have possessed it: Eleanor, Dr. Whitcomb, and his elderly assistant, Mr. Heir. She lifted the paper toward the candle but stopped before the flame touched its edge. Destroying it would protect the secret for a moment, yet it would also erase the first proof that her expulsion was connected to something larger than altered estate accounts. She folded the note twice, slipped it inside the lining of her glove, and opened the door. The corridor was empty. At the far end, a tapestry stirred, although every window was closed. Eleanor crossed the passage quickly and pulled it aside, revealing the narrow servant's stair. Footsteps were already retreating below. She followed them as far as the second landing, but another tightening beneath her ribs forced her to grip the rail. She would not endanger her child by chasing a shadow through the house. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Finch appeared below, carrying a lamp. Her eyes moved at once to Eleanor's pale face. "You should sit down. I need my carriage prepared." His Grace ordered that none of the Blackmere carriages be placed at your disposal. The housekeeper's voice trembled with shame. "Lady Seraphina has also dismissed Thomas and both of your personal maids. She says the household cannot continue paying servants whose loyalty is uncertain." Eleanor absorbed the cruelty without allowing it to show. Thomas had driven her through flooded roads to deliver medicine to the eastern cottages. Her maids, Clara and Bess, had served her since before her marriage. By stripping those people of employment, Seraphina meant to isolate Eleanor and frighten anyone who might help her. "Where are they?" "Waiting near the old laundry yard. They refused to leave until they knew you were safe." Eleanor descended carefully. "Then ask Thomas to find a hired coach in the village. Tell Clara and Bess that I release them from service with 3 months' wages. Your Grace, Lady Seraphina, has taken control of the household funds. The wages will come from my pin money." Mrs. Finch's silence answered before words could. Eleanor turned toward her. "What has happened to it?" "Lord Edwin emptied the small account this afternoon. He said the money must be retained until the missing rents are recovered." Julian had not merely exiled her. He had allowed Edwin to leave her without transportation, servants, or the limited income guaranteed under her marriage settlement. Eleanor felt something inside her change. Until that moment, some wounded part of her had still hoped Julian's anger would cool once he examined the evidence. Now she understood that waiting for his fairness would place both her and the child at the mercy of the people controlling him. "Mrs. Finch, did my mother's writing desk arrive from the south room?" "It was moved into storage last spring. The lower drawer has a false back. Inside it is a small purse and a brass key. Bring both to the laundry yard, but allow no one to see you." The housekeeper nodded and hurried away. Eleanor returned to her bedchamber and packed only what she could carry herself: 2 plain dresses, warm stockings, her father's medical notebook, and the miniature portrait of her mother. Her hand paused over Julian's letters, tied together with a faded blue ribbon. They belonged to another life, written before disappointment had turned his tenderness into distance and his fear of dying without an heir into something harder. She left them where they lay. A floorboard creaked behind her. Eleanor spun around to find Clara standing inside the doorway. breathless and red-eyed. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I came through the dressing room because Lord Edwin has placed a footman outside the main staircase." "Why?" "He says, you may try to remove estate property." Clara clenched her hands. "But that is not all. I heard Lady Seraphina ordering a servant to burn the papers from your office before midnight." Eleanor closed the travelling bag. Her duplicate ledgers were either already destroyed or about to be. "Did she mention the locked cabinet?" "She said it must appear empty if anyone asks." The official accusation and the observable truth no longer merely differed. Someone was actively constructing the evidence after Julian had condemned her. Eleanor reached for her cloak. "Do you remember the parcels I asked you to deliver to Mr. Bell every quarter?" Clara nodded. Receipts and copies of the tenant payments. Relief passed through Eleanor, followed by alarm. Mr. Bell, the village schoolmaster, held records capable of disproving the theft. If Edwin knew about them, the old man could be in danger. "Find Bess and meet me at the laundry yard. Say nothing about Mr. Bell." Clara moved toward the dressing room door, then hesitated. "There is something else. Dr. Whitcomb came to Blackmere this afternoon. Lord Edwin met him at the west entrance and took him into the library." The doctor looked frightened. "Did you see him leave?" "No, Your Grace." Eleanor's hand tightened around the ivory box. The missing certificate, the threat, and the physician's unexplained presence could not be separate accidents. Before she could question Clara further, Julian's voice sounded in the corridor. "Eleanor, open this door." Clara slipped into the dressing room and disappeared. Eleanor drew a steadying breath before admitting her husband. Julian entered alone, though the shadow of the footman remained beyond the threshold. His anger had faded, leaving a weariness that might once have moved her. "Seraphina tells me you intend to leave tonight without an escort. You removed my escort. Hawthorne House is 6 hours away. The roads are unsafe after dark. Then perhaps you should not have ordered a woman from her home before dawn." His gaze fell to the travelling bag. "What are you taking?" "Things that belonged to me before I became your wife. Everything in this house is subject to the settlement. Do you truly believe I would steal from you?" Julian did not answer at once. That hesitation hurt more than an accusation. Eleanor stepped closer and searched the face of the man she had once trusted. "You were given a choice tonight. You could have examined the original records. You could have questioned me privately. You could have waited one day. Instead, you transferred my authority to the two people who brought the accusation. Edwin is my blood, and I am your wife." The words left a silence between them that neither could cross. Julian's eyes dropped briefly toward the hand she held beneath her cloak. For one terrifying moment, Eleanor thought he understood. Then, someone called his name from the corridor. Lord Edwin appeared at the open door holding a familiar leather case beneath one arm. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, but Dr. Whitcomb has suffered an accident." Eleanor went cold. "Where is he?" Edwin looked directly at her, his expression smooth and unreadable. "His carriage overturned near the Western Bridge. They found him unconscious, and the bridgekeeper says he was carrying a letter addressed to you." Eleanor's first instinct was to reach for the ivory box, but she forced her hand to remain still beneath her cloak. "Where is Dr. Whitcomb now?" she asked. "The gamekeeper's men carried him to the West Lodge," Edwin replied. "I have sent for another physician. I will go to him." Julian stepped between her and the door. "You are leaving Blackmere. Dr. Whitcomb came here to see me, and now he lies unconscious on your land. I shall not depart until I know whether he will live." Edwin's mouth tightened. "The man has already caused enough trouble. His medicines failed you for years, and his private visits have encouraged rumors that no husband should be expected to tolerate." The insult was carefully shaped, vague enough to stain Eleanor without becoming an accusation that could be disproved. Julian's expression darkened exactly as Edwin intended. "What? Private visits?" "Dr. Whitcomb treated me with your knowledge," Eleanor said, "most often while you were in London. And the letter he carried, I have not seen it." Edwin opened the leather case and removed a crumpled envelope. Eleanor recognized the physician's handwriting, but the wax seal had already been broken. "It contains nothing improper," Edwin said, "although one sentence is curious." He unfolded the page. "Her Grace must be removed from Blackmere before the final dose is administered." Julian looked at Eleanor as though the words confirmed something shameful. She extended her hand. "Give me the letter." Edwin hesitated, then passed it to her. Eleanor read the sentence twice. The ink resembled Dr. Whitcomb's, yet the downstroke in the word final was blunt. The physician used a sharply cut quill that left a fine split at the end of every long stroke. More importantly, he had never addressed her as Her Grace in private medical correspondence. He called her Lady Eleanor, as he had since childhood. "This was altered," she said. "The first half of the sentence is his writing. The final words are not." Edwin gave a soft, incredulous laugh. "You can determine that from a glance. My father taught me to prepare medical records before he died. I copied hundreds of Dr. Whitcomb's prescriptions while assisting at his practice." Julian knew this. During the first winter of their marriage, an outbreak of lung fever had struck the eastern cottages. Eleanor had organized a temporary infirmary in the parish hall, measured remedies, and kept daily records of every family exposed to the illness. Julian had praised her before the tenants and told her that Blackmere would remember what she had done. Now he stared at the altered letter, as though that memory inconvenienced him. "If you believe the message was changed," he said, "the new physician may examine it." "A physician is not an expert in handwriting." "Nor are you," Edwin replied. Eleanor folded the letter and placed it inside her cloak. "Then there can be no objection to my keeping it." Edwin reached for her, but Julian lifted one hand. Let her have it. That small concession did not erase what he had already done. Eleanor moved toward the corridor. "Have my horse saddled." "You are not riding to the West Lodge," Julian said. "The road is steep, and you are unwell. My health did not trouble you when you ordered me to travel 6 hours before sunrise." His face changed. She saw regret begin and pride suppress it. "I will accompany you," he said at last. Edwin stepped forward. "Julian, the estate papers require your attention. They have waited this long." "The creditors arrive tomorrow." Eleanor turned sharply. "What creditors?" Neither man answered. She understood then why Edwin had moved so quickly to take control of the accounts. Blackmere was not merely being examined. Some demand was about to be made against it. Julian had handed him authority on the eve of a financial deadline. "Which creditors?" she repeated. "A private matter," Edwin said. "Nothing concerning you now. Every debt secured against Blackmere concerns the families who live upon its land." Eleanor looked at Julian. "Have you pledged the Western farms?" "I have signed nothing of that nature." "Not yet," Edwin said smoothly. "But unless the missing rents are restored by noon tomorrow, difficult measures may become necessary." Eleanor felt the pieces begin to align. The altered ledgers made her responsible for vanished money. Her expulsion removed her from the accounts. The destroyed duplicate records prevented an immediate defense. By noon tomorrow, Edwin could claim that selling the Western farms was the only way to satisfy the estate's creditors. Those lands housed 47 tenant families and included the mill that supplied flour throughout Blackmere. Once sold, they could never easily be recovered. "No document concerning the Western farms is to be signed until the accounts have been examined by an independent solicitor," she said. Edwin smiled. "You no longer possess authority here." "No, but the farms formed part of the marriage settlement negotiated by my mother's trustees. Any sale affecting their income requires notice to those trustees." It was not absolute protection, but it could delay him. His smile disappeared. Julian looked from one to the other. "Why was I not told this?" "You were," Eleanor replied. "I explained the clause when Edwin first proposed the sale last spring. You thanked me for preventing an expensive legal dispute." Julian's silence revealed how thoroughly he had forgotten the work she performed whenever it ceased to trouble him. Mrs. Finch appeared at the far end of the corridor. She carried no visible purse or key, but when she passed Eleanor, their hands touched for an instant. A small brass key slid into Eleanor's glove. "The horses are being prepared," the housekeeper said, "and the West Lodge has sent word that Dr. Whitcomb is awake." Edwin's face went still. It lasted less than a second, but Eleanor saw it. "Did he speak?" she asked. "Only 3 words before he lost consciousness again." Mrs. Finch looked at Eleanor rather than the Duke. He said, "Not the tonic." Eleanor felt Julian's attention move to her. She drew the small medicine bottle from her traveling bag and held it beneath the corridor lamp. The liquid inside appeared clear, but a faint blue line stained the silver rim of its stopper. "This tonic was prescribed in Dr. Whitcomb's name," she said. "It made me ill every time I drank it. If he did not order the final dose, someone intended to give it to me before morning." Julian took the bottle, his face draining of color. Edwin recovered quickly. A sick man's confused words proved nothing. Then you will not object to an examination of the medicine room, Eleanor said. The stockbook records every ingredient received, measured, and removed. Mrs. Finch's gaze dropped. Your Grace, the stockbook is missing. Eleanor turned toward Edwin. He showed no surprise. That was the contradiction she needed. A man, innocent of the book's disappearance, should at least have asked when it vanished. Instead, Edwin merely adjusted the leather case under his arm, and from its half-open clasp protruded the torn corner of a blue-covered volume, the exact color of the missing medicine ledger. Eleanor looked at the blue corner protruding from Edwin's leather case and made no move toward it. If she accused him now, he would close the clasp, deny everything, and destroy the ledger before anyone could examine it. Instead, she met Mrs. Finch's eyes for the briefest instant. The housekeeper followed her gaze and understood. We should go to Dr. Whitcomb, Eleanor said. If he can speak again, he may identify who altered his prescription. Edwin pressed the case against his side. The new physician should question him without interference. You mean without me present? I mean without a woman accused of stealing from this estate, influencing its only witness. Julian glanced at the medicine bottle in his hand. Doubt had entered his face, but Eleanor knew his pride would resist any truth that proved how recklessly he had condemned her. Edwin will remain here, he said. Mrs. Finch may accompany us to the lodge. Edwin stiffened. The creditor's documents require your signature tonight. Then they can wait until I return. Eleanor moved past him, and Mrs. Finch followed. As they descended the main staircase, a crash sounded behind them. Edwin's leather case had slipped from his arm and struck the floor. Papers scattered across the landing. The blue medicine ledger slid beneath a console table. Edwin lunged toward it, but Mrs. Finch was closer. She bent as if to gather the fallen papers and placed one foot firmly over the ledger's cover. How clumsy of me, she said. Leave them, Edwin snapped. Eleanor turned back. What has fallen from your case? Private estate records. Edwin snatched up the loose papers, while Mrs. Finch used the edge of her shoe to push the blue book behind the console's carved leg. Julian did not notice. His attention had been drawn to Seraphina, who appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing Eleanor's household keys at her waist. The silver ring struck against her gown with each step. Must you leave now? Seraphina asked him. Lord Edwin told me the Western contracts cannot be delayed. Dr. Whitcomb may have been attacked, Eleanor said. Seraphina's gaze moved to the tonic bottle in Julian's hand. For the first time that evening, fear broke through her composure. That is Eleanor's medicine. Why are you carrying it? Whitcomb told her not to take it. Seraphina recovered quickly. He has changed her medicines many times. Perhaps that is what he meant. Perhaps, Julian said, seizing upon the explanation, because it demanded nothing painful from him. Eleanor watched him make the easier choice again. Seraphina descended and reached for the bottle. I shall return it to the medicine room. Eleanor closed her fingers around Seraphina's wrist before she could touch it. No. The single word silenced the hall. Seraphina stared down at Eleanor's hand, as if a servant had struck her. You forget your position. My position may have changed. The ownership of that bottle has not. Eleanor released her and addressed Julian. Seal it, inside an empty wine box. Mrs. Finch will hold the key until it can be examined. You no longer command my servants, Seraphina said. I am not commanding anyone. I am setting a boundary. Nothing prescribed for me is to be touched, destroyed, or returned to the medicine room. Julian looked between them. Then he gave the bottle to Mrs. Finch. Do as she asks. Seraphina's face remained pleasant, but her fingers closed tightly around the household keys. Eleanor had won something small yet necessary. The tonic would survive the night, and Seraphina knew she could no longer remove it quietly. Outside, Thomas waited with Eleanor's mare and Julian's black gelding. Clara and Bess stood beside a hired coach in the laundry yard, their belongings packed into 2 small bundles. Eleanor paused long enough to place her purse in Clara's hand. There is enough for both of you to stay at the Crown Inn for several nights. Do not return to your families until I know who is watching the roads. We will go with you, Bess insisted. Not to the lodge. Find Mr. Bell and tell him to secure every receipt I sent him. If anyone asks, you have gone to visit Bess's aunt. Clara glanced toward the house. What if Lord Edwin's men reach him first? Eleanor removed the brass key Mrs. Finch had passed to her. Give him this. It opens the old parish strongbox. The records will be safer there than in his cottage. Julian had stopped several paces away, close enough to hear. You kept estate papers outside Blackmere. Copies, Eleanor replied, after Edwin attempted to remove the tenant receipts last spring. You never told me. I did. You said your cousin had merely misunderstood my filing system. Julian's expression hardened, not at Edwin, but at the reminder of his own refusal to listen. You seem to have prepared for betrayal long before tonight. I prepared for carelessness. Betrayal required no preparation. You announced it before witnesses. She mounted with Thomas's assistance. The journey to the West Lodge took less than 20 minutes, but Eleanor felt every movement of the horse. Julian rode beside her, without speaking. Mrs. Finch followed in the gamekeeper's cart, guarding the sealed bottle. At the lodge, Dr. Whitcomb lay upon a narrow bed, with blood darkening the bandage around his temple. Eleanor immediately noticed the mud on his boots. It was pale and chalky, unlike the black soil surrounding the western bridge. Where was his carriage found? She asked the gamekeeper. Below the bridge, Your Grace. Then why is there limestone mud on his boots? The nearest chalk road is east of Blackmere. The gamekeeper looked confused. I only know where Lord Edwin told us to search. Eleanor knelt beside the physician and examined his pupils. One was slightly larger than the other, suggesting a serious blow to the head. There were bruises around his wrists, as though he had been restrained before the supposed accident. She reached for his coat and found a small brass button trapped inside the torn lining of his sleeve. It bore the crest of Blackmere's estate office, a falcon above 3 wheat sheaves. This did not come from his clothing, she said. Julian took the button from her. Every senior estate servant wears these, including Edwin's clerk and driver. Dr. Whitcomb stirred. His hand closed weakly around Eleanor's wrist. The certificate, he breathed. They know. Who knows? Eleanor leaned closer. Who took it? His lips moved again, but only one name emerged. Seraphina. Julian stepped back as if struck. Then Dr. Whitcomb's eyes opened fully, fixed upon Eleanor's hidden abdomen, and widened with terror. Do not return to Hawthorne House, he whispered. They are waiting for you there. Eleanor felt Julian's attention shift from Dr. Whitcomb's terrified face to the hand resting protectively beneath her cloak. She released the physician's wrist before her husband could ask the question she was not yet prepared to answer. Who is waiting at Hawthorne House? She asked. Dr. Whitcomb tried to speak, but pain seized him. His eyes rolled back, and his body went rigid against the mattress. Eleanor immediately loosened his collar and turned his head to keep his airway clear. Bring folded blankets, she ordered. Raise his shoulders, but do not force him to sit. The gamekeeper's wife rushed to obey. Eleanor counted the physician's pulse while examining the wound beneath his bandage. The blood at its edge had begun to dry, yet the swelling continued to spread behind his left ear. He cannot remain here, she said. He needs a surgeon. Send a rider to Ashford and another to the military infirmary at Wycliffe. Whoever arrives first must be brought directly to the lodge. Julian moved toward the door, but the gamekeeper hesitated. Lord Edwin instructed us to keep the matter private. Your Grace, he said, a public report of an accident would damage the estate before tomorrow's meeting. A man may die because my cousin fears embarrassment, Julian said. Send both riders. Eleanor looked at him. This was the first time that evening he had openly contradicted Edwin, but it came only after another person's blood had made denial difficult. Mrs. Finch entered, carrying the sealed wine box containing the tonic. When Eleanor asked whether the blue ledger had been secured, the housekeeper gave the slightest nod. It is hidden where Lady Seraphina will not easily find it. The answer brought only limited relief. They possessed the medicine, the altered letter, the brass button, and perhaps the missing stockbook, but none of those objects yet proved who had attacked Dr. Whitcomb or why Hawthorne House had become a trap. Eleanor opened the physician's medical case. Several instruments were missing, and a glass vial had shattered beneath his papers. The sharp medicinal odor rising from the case was familiar. She had smelled it each time her prescribed tonic was poured. Mrs. Finch, bring the wine box closer. Eleanor compared the residue inside the broken vial with the liquid in her bottle. Both left the same faint blue discoloration against silver. This substance was carried in Dr. Whitcomb's case, Julian said. That suggests he prepared it. No. Look at the paper beneath the broken glass. Eleanor lifted a damp sheet by its dry corner. The liquid had washed away the ink across most of the page, but the physician's writing remained visible along one edge. He recorded each medicine in this case. This vial is marked as spirits of lavender. Whatever broke inside it was substituted after he completed the list. She turned the paper toward the lamp. The original quantity was 2 ounces. The vial held nearly 6. Julian studied the page, his expression tightening. Could he have made an error? Dr. Whitcomb has kept medical inventories for 30 years. He would not place an unidentified compound in a falsely labeled bottle, especially while traveling. Eleanor looked toward the bruises around the physician's wrists. Someone restrained him, replaced the contents of his case, struck him, and then placed him near the Western Bridge to make his injuries appear accidental. That is speculation, a voice said from the doorway. Serafina entered the lodge with Edwin behind her. Neither appeared breathless from the journey, which meant they had followed by carriage almost immediately. Edwin's leather case was closed now, and the blue corner no longer protruded from it. "You were told to remain at Blackmere," Julian said. Serafina approached him with an expression of wounded concern. "We came because I feared Eleanor's distress might lead her to misunderstand the doctor's words. She has suffered terribly over her inability to conceive. It would be cruel to encourage fantasies at such a moment." The meaning was unmistakable. Serafina suspected the truth and was preparing to discredit it before Eleanor could reveal it. Eleanor wanted to announce the child immediately, to force Julian to see what his betrayal had endangered. But Dr. Whitcomb's warning stopped her. If Serafina knew about the pregnancy and had access to the medicine room, the child was not merely a secret, it was a target. "My imagination did not bruise his wrists," Eleanor said, "nor did it alter the mud on his boots." Edwin glanced down at the pale stains. The carriage may have travelled along the eastern road before the accident. Then the bridge-keeper lied when he said Dr. Whitcomb approached from the west. Edwin's eyes sharpened. "You have not spoken to the bridge-keeper. Neither have you, according to your earlier account. Yet you seem remarkably certain of what he saw." For an instant no one moved. Then Edwin smiled. "I repeated what the gamekeeper reported." The gamekeeper frowned. "I reported nothing about the direction of the carriage, my lord." Serafina intervened before Julian could respond. "This questioning is exhausting, Dr. Whitcomb. Eleanor should leave as planned." She reached toward the medical case. "I shall take responsibility for these dangerous substances." Eleanor closed the lid beneath Serafina's hand. "You will touch nothing belonging to him. You have no right to decide that. His assistant does." Eleanor turned toward the gamekeeper. "Send a third rider to Mr. Heir. Until he arrives, this case remains sealed in the presence of witnesses." Edwin moved closer. "Every delay increases the danger to Blackmere. The creditors will demand payment at noon. Then show Julian the original loan agreement. The matter is beyond your understanding." Eleanor rose. "I understand that the Western farms produce more annual income than the amount you claim is missing. Selling them to repay a temporary shortage would be financial madness unless the buyer and the creditor were connected." Julian looked sharply at Edwin. "Are they? Of course not. Then you will have no objection to naming both parties." Edwin's silence lasted too long. Serafina stepped beside Julian and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Eleanor is using a sick man's accident to distract you from her theft." The accusation landed exactly where intended. Julian looked at the altered ledgers, the medical evidence, and his wife, and still could not bring himself to admit that he might have chosen wrongly. "At noon," he said, "all accounts will be examined before the creditors. Eleanor may present her receipts if they exist. It was not trust, it was merely permission to defend herself against a lie he had already made public." Eleanor accepted because 47 families depended upon those farms. Then, the meeting must take place in the Great Hall, with the tenant representatives and my mother's trustee present. Edwin's composure finally broke. "This is an internal estate matter, not after you accused its duchess before witnesses." Eleanor removed her cloak and placed it over Dr. Whitcomb's shivering body, surrendering the warmth she needed to protect him. "You made the accusation public. The examination will be public as well." Julian met her eyes. She saw shame there, but not yet courage. "Agreed," he said. Edwin looked toward the unconscious physician, then at the sealed case and medicine bottle. He had understood what Serafina had not. Eleanor was no longer trying to save her marriage. She was building a chain of witnesses. As he turned to leave, Mrs. Finch stepped aside. and something small fell from Edwin's coat onto the floor. It was a second brass button bearing the estate office crest, its broken thread stained with Dr. Whitcomb's blood. The blood-stained button rolled once across the floor and came to rest against Julian's boot. Everyone in the lodge saw it. Edwin looked down, then slowly lifted his gaze. "That is not mine." Julian bent and picked it up. The broken thread matched the empty place on Edwin's coat, where one brass button was missing beneath the lapel. "You told me you had not seen Dr. Whitcomb before his carriage was found," Julian said. "I had not." "Then explain this." Edwin's face tightened, as though he had been waiting for the question. "Eleanor put it there." Serafina gave a shocked gasp, perfectly timed for the room. Edwin continued before anyone else could speak. "She had already found one button in the physician's sleeve. She could easily have taken another from my coat when my case fell at Blackmere." Eleanor stared at him. "You claim I tore a button from your coat without your noticing, stained it with Dr. Whitcomb's blood, and placed it in your pocket while standing several feet away. You have spent years handling medicines and tending wounds. Blood would hardly be difficult for you to obtain." It was an absurd accusation, yet it offered Julian the escape he wanted. Uncertainty. He could investigate Edwin and admit that his own cousin might have attacked a physician, or he could condemn Eleanor again and preserve the judgment he had already made. "Search his pockets," Eleanor said. Edwin stepped back. "I will not submit to being handled like a criminal at her command." "Then empty them yourself." Julian closed his hand around the button. "Do it." Edwin removed a watch, several coins, a penknife, 2 folded contracts, and a white handkerchief. The final object landed upon the table with a metallic click. A small iron key. Mrs. Finch's eyes widened. "That opens the medicine room cabinet." Serafina touched the key ring at her waist. "Impossible. The medicine key is here." She lifted the proper silver key for everyone to see. Mrs. Finch examined the iron one without touching it. "This is a copy. The locksmith's file marks are still visible." Julian turned toward Edwin. "Why do you possess it?" "I found it among Eleanor's papers." "Then why was it in your pocket?" "Because I intended to return it." Eleanor almost laughed at the weakness of the lie, but Julian's expression warned her that he might still accept it. "Ask the village locksmith who ordered the duplicate," she said. "His work ledger will contain the date and payment." Edwin's hand moved toward the contracts on the table. "We have no time for every distraction she creates. The creditors may seize the mill tomorrow if the agreement is not signed tonight." "You said the deadline was noon," Eleanor replied. "It was moved forward." "By whom?" "Mr. Harcourt, the principal creditor." Eleanor knew that name. Harcourt Investment House had offered to purchase the Western Farms 6 months earlier through an unnamed representative. She had refused because the price was less than half the land's value. "Harcourt is both the creditor and the intended buyer," she said. Julian looked at Edwin. "Is that true?" "It is the only company willing to extend the estate further credit. The sale provision is merely security. Security that becomes permanent ownership when you declare default," Eleanor said. Edwin struck the table with his palm. Dr. Whitcomb stirred at the sound, and Eleanor immediately moved between the bed and the others. "Enough," she said. "Take this argument outside." Her hand rested near the physician's shoulder until his breathing steadied. Protecting him cost her the chance to seize Edwin's contracts, but she would not use an injured man's suffering as carelessly as they did. Julian gathered the papers and stepped into the adjoining room. Eleanor followed, with Serafina and Edwin close behind. "Show me the agreement," she demanded. "You have no standing to examine it," Edwin said. "The Western income formed part of her settlement," Julian replied. "She has standing." Eleanor took the first document and read quickly. Harcourt had advanced Blackmere £15,000. If payment failed by midnight, control of the mill and Western Farms would transfer immediately to the company for 99 years. At the bottom appeared Julian's signature beneath a paragraph stating that the Duchess had examined and approved the terms. Eleanor's own name was written beside his. "This is not my signature." Julian's face hardened. "I watched you sign it." "You watched a veiled woman sign it at the estate office after dusk." Edwin said I was ill and wished to avoid the servants. He went very still. Eleanor remembered that evening. She had been at the Eastern cottages tending a child with scarlet fever. When she returned, Julian had already left for London. "Mrs. Finch can confirm where I was." Serafina folded her arms. A housekeeper loyal to you can confirm anything. So can the child's parents, the parish curate, and 12 neighbours. Edwin gathered the contracts. Those witnesses cannot be brought here before midnight. Unless Julian signs the final transfer now, Harcourt will petition for seizure and expose Blackmere's insolvency throughout London. The debt itself may be fraudulent, Eleanor said. Give me until noon, as you promised. Mr. Bell holds the true rent receipts. My trustee can compare them with the loan accounts. Julian walked to the window. Beyond the glass, darkness covered the road to Blackmere. Eleanor watched the struggle in his face. He knew Edwin had lied about the medicine room key. He had seen the blood-stained button. He had heard the contradiction concerning the creditor's deadline. He knew Eleanor's signature could be verified. This was the moment when he could stop everything by refusing to sign. Edwin approached him quietly. If Harcourt files against the estate, your seat in Parliament will be destroyed. Every enemy of your family will learn that Blackmere cannot pay its debts. Sign tonight, investigate tomorrow, and recover the land later if Eleanor proves her claim. Once transferred, the farms may be divided and sold, Eleanor warned. You will not recover them, Julian turned. If I refuse, the entire estate may be placed at risk. That is what Edwin wants you to believe. And what if you are wrong? Then wait 3 hours. Send riders for the receipts and the locksmith's ledger. Verify one fact before surrendering 47 families to a company connected to your cousin. Julian looked at her for a long moment. Then he dipped the pen into the ink. I cannot gamble Blackmere upon your innocence. The words broke the last remaining thread between them. Eleanor did not plead. She watched him sign the transfer and hand Edwin control of the Western farms. Serafina released a quiet breath of relief. Edwin folded the agreement and placed it inside his coat beside the blood-stained button. The tenants will be informed at sunrise, he said. Harcourt's men will assume possession immediately. Eleanor's goal changed in that instant. She would no longer prove herself merely to restore her place beside Julian. She would protect her child, Dr. Whitcomb, and every family Julian had sacrificed to preserve his pride. From the bedchamber came a weak, urgent sound. Dr. Whitcomb had awakened again. Eleanor hurried to him and bent close as he struggled to speak. The Western Mill, he whispered. Not for the land. Beneath it. Before Eleanor could ask what he meant, a bell began ringing in the distance. The gamekeeper rushed to the window. An orange glow rose beyond the trees in the direction of the Western farms. The mill is burning, he said, and the tenant cottages are locked from the outside. For one suspended second, no one moved. Then Eleanor seized the gamekeeper's lantern and ran for the door. Julian caught her arm before she reached it. You cannot ride into a fire. There are families trapped inside those cottages. The gamekeeper's men will free them. They do not know which children are ill, which doors are warped, or where the winter oil is stored. I do. She pulled free and turned to Mrs. and Finks. Keep Dr. Whitcomb warm. Let no one remove the medical case, the tonic, or the altered letter. If Mr. Heir arrives, place everything directly into his custody. Edwin stepped into her path. The Western farms no longer fall under your authority. Then pray the flames. Recognize your paperwork. Eleanor passed him without slowing. Outside, the orange glow had already spread across the sky. Julian mounted beside her, while the gamekeeper and 3 men followed with axes, ropes, and water barrels. Serafina remained at the lodge, claiming the smoke would damage her lungs. Edwin disappeared in the opposite direction, with the signed transfer hidden inside his coat. The first cottage stood half a mile from the mill. Eleanor heard screaming before she saw the doors. Iron chains had been looped through the outer handles and secured with new padlocks. Men swung axes against them, while women and children pounded desperately from inside. Break the windows, Eleanor shouted. Cover your faces and crawl beneath the smoke. Julian dismounted and drove his shoulder against the nearest door. It did not move. Eleanor recognized the cottage from her winter inspections. The rear wall has a coal hatch. She ran around the building, dropped to her knees, and pulled at a wooden panel half buried beneath weeds. Julian tore it free. A small boy crawled through first, coughing violently, followed by his mother and infant sister. At the next cottage, an elderly tenant lay unconscious near the window. Eleanor wrapped a wet cloth around her face, climbed through the opening, and dragged him toward the floor where the air remained clearer. Julian followed, lifting the man across his shoulders. For the next half hour, titles and accusations disappeared beneath smoke, splintered wood, and terrified voices. Eleanor moved from family to family, counting every person against the tenant lists she had memorized. "The Carter household is missing 2 girls," she said. "They sleep in the rear room." Julian entered the burning cottage with Thomas and returned carrying 1 child beneath each arm. His hair was singed, his coat blackened, and blood ran from a cut across his palm. Eleanor examined the girls, found them breathing, and sent them toward the stream. She did not thank Julian. Saving children from a danger his signature had enabled was not a favor to her. When the last locked cottage had been emptied, the Western mill collapsed inward with a deafening roar. Sparks rose like a storm of red stars, carried by the wind toward the grain store. "Move the water line to the storehouse," Julian ordered. The tenants hesitated. Only hours earlier, Harcourt's men had arrived with notices, declaring that they no longer worked for Blackmere. Julian's authority had been surrendered by his own hand. "They will obey you," he said to Eleanor, the admission bitter on his tongue. She faced the exhausted families. "If the grain catches, none of the surrounding villages will have flour before winter. Help me save it, not for the Duke and not for Harcourt, but for your children." The tenants formed a line from the stream. Buckets passed from hand to hand as Eleanor directed men to soak the roof and remove the oil barrels stored along the southern wall. Her knowledge of the mill grounds allowed them to contain the fire before it reached the winter grain. Julian worked among them, but no one looked to him for orders. Every question came to Eleanor. Near dawn, rain began to fall. The mill was gone, 5 cottages were damaged, and dozens of families stood shivering in wet nightclothes. Yet no life had been lost. Eleanor sat beside the old tenant she had rescued and listened to his chest. The uneven rasp was not caused by smoke alone. "How long has Mr. Carter been ill?" she asked his daughter. "Since Lord Edwin's men brought the new flour sacks 3 days ago. Several others became sick after eating the bread." Eleanor looked toward the ruined mill. Dr. Whitcomb had said the danger lay beneath it, not in the land. She remembered the Western mill's cellar, a cool stone chamber used to store grain samples and old machinery. If Edwin intended merely to destroy evidence, why lock the tenants inside their homes? The fire had been designed to kill witnesses, as well as erase something beneath the mill. A tenant named Samuel Reed approached carrying a scorched canvas sack. "Your Grace, I pulled this from the grain store. It bears Blackmere's mark, but it is not our wheat." Eleanor opened the sack. The grain smelled faintly sweet and left dark dust against her fingertips. She crushed several kernels with the back of a spoon. A black, oily residue appeared inside them. "Ergot," she said. "Contaminated rye has been mixed with the wheat." Julian crouched beside her. "What does that mean?" "It causes convulsions, confusion, severe pain, and sometimes death. The tenants were being poisoned through their bread." She looked toward the mill's smoking ruins. "Dr. Whitcomb may have traced their symptoms here. That is why he was attacked." Julian's face went pale. "And your tonic may contain a preparation made from the same fungus." The consequence of his signature now stood before him in human form: coughing children, homeless families, poisoned grain, and a destroyed mill legally controlled by Harcourt. He ordered his men to seize the remaining sacks, but a stranger, wearing a dark green coat, stepped from a carriage at the edge of the road. 6 armed guards stood behind him. "I am Mr. Harcourt," he announced. "As of midnight, the Western farms, mill, grain, and all records located upon this land belong to my company. Your Grace no longer has the authority to remove anything." Julian reached for the transfer in Edwin's possession, only to realize his cousin had vanished. This transfer was obtained through fraud. Harcourt produced an identical signed copy, then challenge it before the courts. "Until that time, my men will take possession." The guards surrounded the grain store. Julian could not revoke what he had signed with a spoken command. He could not order Harcourt from land he had legally surrendered, nor could he search the mill cellar without risking arrest for trespass. Eleanor stood, holding the contaminated grain sack. "This is evidence of attempted murder." "It is spoiled grain," Harcourt replied, "and it belongs to me." He extended his hand. Eleanor gave the sack to Samuel instead. "Take this to Mr. Hale at the West Lodge. Do not travel by the main road, and do not surrender it to anyone without a magistrate present. Harcourt's guards moved towards Samuel. Eleanor placed herself between them. If you interfere with a witness carrying suspected poison, every person here will testify to it. The tenants closed around her. Harcourt studied their faces and signaled his men to stop. Julian stepped beside Eleanor, but she did not mistake his presence for rescue. He had created the authority now being used against them. "The mill cellar must be opened," she said. Harcourt smiled. "It will be filled with stone at noon. The ruins are unsafe." Eleanor understood the deadline. Whatever Dr. Whitcomb had discovered beneath the mill would disappear forever when the cellar was sealed. She looked at the black smoke curling from the collapsed roof, then at the exhausted tenants, whose lives Julian's signature had placed in danger. "We have 6 hours," she said. "Before noon, I will enter that cellar and bring out whatever they tried to burn." Eleanor knew Harcourt would watch every visible entrance to the ruined mill. The main cellar steps had collapsed beneath burning timber, and the loading hatch stood within sight of his armed guards. But Blackmere's mills had been built over older drainage channels, and 6 years earlier Eleanor had paid masons to clear one of those tunnels after floodwater damaged the western cottages. Edwin had called the expense unnecessary. Now that forgotten passage offered the only route beneath the ruins. "Samuel, take the grain sack to Mr. Hale," she said. "Thomas, bring Clara and Bess to the parish hall. Every displaced family will sleep there tonight." Harcourt gave a contemptuous laugh. "You cannot use Blackmere property to house people who now answer to my company. The parish hall belongs to the church, and its winter fund was established from my mother's trust. You possess no authority over either." For the first time since her expulsion, Eleanor had a base beyond Julian's control. The hall contained blankets, medicine, locked storage, and written records witnessed by the curate. It was modest, but no household key on Seraphina's waist could close its doors. Julian approached, while Harcourt returned to his carriage. "You knew about the drainage tunnel before the fire." "I knew it existed. That is not the same as knowing someone would burn the mill. Why was I never told it had been repaired?" Eleanor looked at the soot covering his face. "You approved the expense." His expression revealed no recognition. "The northern harvest failed that year. You were in London negotiating an extension of credit, so I used my pin money to pay the masons before the autumn rains. The repair prevented the cottages from flooding. You paid for estate work yourself?" "I did it repeatedly." She did not list the seed grain, the infirmary, the school roof, or the wages she had quietly covered whenever Edwin claimed the estate account lacked ready funds. Julian's ignorance was not evidence that her work had been hidden. It was evidence that he had accepted its benefits without asking who provided them. "Eleanor." His voice softened, but she raised one hand. "Remorse will not open the cellar. If you wish to help, do exactly as I say, and expect nothing from me in return." He accepted the rebuke without protest. "Tell me what you need. Keep Harcourt's guards at the loading hatch. Demand an inventory of every sack and tool they claim as company property. Make enough noise that they watch you instead of the stream. And you, that is no longer information I am willing to entrust to you." Pain moved across his face. Eleanor felt it and refused to let it alter her judgment. He had handed her safety to Edwin, her position to Seraphina, and the western farms to Harcourt. Trust could not be restored because he finally looked sorry. Julian walked toward the guards and began demanding the inventory. While their attention shifted, Eleanor led Mrs. Finch, Thomas, and the gamekeeper downstream. They entered the water behind a line of willow trees and found the drainage mouth concealed beneath thorny roots. The opening was barely wide enough to crawl through. "You should remain outside," Thomas said. "The air beneath the mill may be poisonous. That is why I must go. I know which odors and symptoms warn of contaminated grain or chemical fumes." Eleanor wrapped a wet cloth around her mouth and entered first. The tunnel was cold, narrow, and slick with mud. Above them, charred beams groaned beneath the weight of the ruins. After 30 yards, they reached an iron grate. The brass key from her mother's writing desk opened its rusted lock. Mrs. Finch stared at it. "How did your mother possess this key?" The drainage rights were included in her settlement. She insisted upon inspecting every structure attached to its income. Eleanor finally understood why her mother had preserved it. Beyond the grate stood the mill cellar. Most of the room had escaped the flames, but someone had overturned shelves and smashed storage jars. A heavy table blocked a second doorway. Thomas moved it aside, revealing a smaller chamber filled with wooden crates. Each crate bore Blackmere's falcon crest, but beneath the fresh paint, Eleanor found another mark burned into the wood, the initials H.I.H. Harcourt Investment House. Inside lay packets of ergot, empty medicine bottles, sealing wax, and bundles of printed debt notices bearing tenant names. They poisoned the grain, created illnesses, and then charged the families for medicines and unpaid rent, Eleanor said. The false debts allowed Harcourt to claim default across the western farms. Mrs. Finch opened a smaller box and withdrew a stack of physician's certificates. Several declared healthy tenants mentally unfit to manage their leases. Dr. Whitcomb's signature had been copied onto each. Eleanor compared them with the altered letter. The same blunt downstroke appeared throughout. "We need an object that cannot be dismissed as another forgery," she said. Thomas pointed toward the floor. A broken silver measuring spoon lay beneath the table, its bowl stained blue. Engraved on the handle were the initials S.V. It belonged to Seraphina. Eleanor remembered seeing it in the breakfast room weeks earlier, when Seraphina claimed she carried her own sweetener for tea. The spoon connected her directly to the compounds hidden beneath the mill, but it still required documented custody. Eleanor did not touch it. She called the gamekeeper forward and made him describe exactly where it lay. Mrs. Finch wrote the statement on the blank back of a debt notice, recording the time, location, and names of every witness. Only then did Thomas lift the spoon with a clean cloth and place it inside an empty glass jar. Eleanor sealed the lid with untouched wax from Dr. Whitcomb's medical case and asked each witness to press a distinctive mark into it. The gamekeeper used the edge of his signet, Thomas a square buckle, and Mrs. Finch the patterned head of her sewing pin. "If the jar is opened," Eleanor said, "the seals cannot be recreated without all three objects." They gathered one forged certificate, one tenant debt notice, and a sample of the ergot, leaving everything else in place for a magistrate to inspect. A faint scraping sound came from the tunnel. Eleanor extinguished the lantern. In darkness, voices carried through the drain. "They entered here," Edwin said. "Harcourt's men found their footprints beside the stream." Thomas moved toward the grate, but a second noise sounded above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Someone was dragging stones across the ruined floor. Harcourt had begun sealing the cellar early. "Take the jar and the papers," Eleanor whispered to Mrs. Finch. "Use the smaller runoff channel behind the crates. It emerges near the parish meadow. It may be too narrow. You are the only person here. They may not search without drawing suspicion from every servant at Blackmere. Go." Mrs. Finch disappeared into the channel with the evidence beneath her cloak. Eleanor, Thomas, and the gamekeeper returned toward the main tunnel, intending to delay Edwin long enough for her escape. They had gone only a few yards when armed men entered from the stream and blocked the passage. Edwin stepped between them, holding the black chess knight from Eleanor's ivory box. "You should have obeyed the warning," he said. Behind him, another guard dragged Mrs. Finch from the runoff channel. The sealed glass jar was still in her hands. Harcourt took it, examined the three marks pressed into the wax, and smiled. "An admirable chain of evidence," he said. Then he raised the jar above the stone floor and let it fall. The jar struck the stones and shattered. The silver spoon spun across the floor, scattering fragments of glass and wax into the mud. Harcourt ground his heel over the engraved initials until the metal bent beneath his weight. "Now it is merely an object found in a tunnel by a woman accused of theft," he said. Edwin took the forged certificates and tenant notices from Mrs. Finch's cloak and fed them into his lantern flame. Thomas lunged forward, but two guards forced him to his knees. The gamekeeper received a blow to the ribs that left him gasping against the wall. Eleanor watched the documents curl into black ash and refused to show the despair tightening her chest. The visible proof had been destroyed, but destruction itself revealed fear. Innocent men did not seal cellars before an agreed deadline, assault witnesses, and burn records in front of them. The difficulty was proving any of it, once Harcourt controlled the land and Edwin controlled the estate accounts. "Bring them outside," Edwin ordered. "The cellar is unstable. If anyone asks, we rescued them from trespassing beneath dangerous ruins." Eleanor was dragged through the drainage tunnel and into the grey morning light. Julian stood near the mill, surrounded by tenants and Harcourt's guards. His face changed when he saw the blood on Thomas's mouth and the bruise forming across the gamekeeper's cheek. "What happened?" Harcourt answered calmly. "Your wife entered my property illegally, attacked my men, and attempted to plant fabricated evidence beneath the mill." "That is a lie," Mrs. Finch said. Edwin held up the black chess knight. "We found this in Eleanor's pocket beside forged debt notices. She has used these pieces to frighten the tenants and then blamed me for her own scheme." Eleanor almost admired the neatness of the reversal. The object intended as a threat against her had become evidence that she created the threats. Seraphina's carriage arrived from the lodge at the same moment, as though the entire confrontation had been arranged to receive an audience. Dr. Whitcomb's new surgeon followed in a second carriage, accompanied by 2 constables. Seraphina descended and looked upon Eleanor with rehearsed sorrow. "I begged Julian to delay the separation because I feared what humiliation might drive you to do." One of the constables stepped forward. "Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, we have received a complaint accusing you of theft, falsification of estate records, unlawful entry, and attempted poisoning." Julian moved between Eleanor and the constable. "On whose authority?" "Lord Edwin's, acting as estate administrator under the transfer you signed." The words landed with merciless precision. Julian had not merely given Edwin control of the farms. He had granted him the standing to accuse Eleanor in Blackmere's name. "I revoke his authority," Julian said. Harcourt produced the signed agreement. "You cannot revoke a completed transfer because its consequences have become uncomfortable." Eleanor watched Julian finally understand the structure of the trap. Every easy choice he had made now closed another door. Her expulsion discredited her testimony. Seraphina's appointment gave her access to the medicine room. Edwin's authority allowed him to remove records, and the transfer placed the crime scene beneath Harcourt's control. The constable reached for Eleanor's arm. "You must come with us." "She will not," Julian said. "Your Grace, obstruction will not help her." Julian looked at the tenants gathered around the ruined mill, then at Eleanor. She saw the last remnants of his political caution fall away. The signature, authorizing the original loan, was obtained through deception, he said loudly. "I did not witness my wife sign it, though I previously claimed that I had." Edwin's face sharpened. "Julian, consider what you are admitting." "I am admitting that I lied. To preserve my pride, I accepted another person's word because I did not wish to acknowledge that I had signed £15,000 of debt without reading every term." A murmur passed through the crowd. Julian continued, each word costing him the reputation he had tried to protect. "I then accused the Duchess without examining her duplicate accounts. I removed her household authority, permitted her private funds to be seized, and signed the Western Farms to Harcourt, despite evidence that her name had been forged. Any accusation made under Edwin's authority rests upon powers I granted through negligence and dishonesty." Harcourt's expression hardened. Julian's confession could not restore the farms, but it destroyed the appearance that Eleanor's guilt had already been established by an honorable husband. "Your public embarrassment does not prove her innocence," Seraphina said. "No," Eleanor replied, "but your haste may prove yours." The constable still took her into custody. Julian demanded that she be held at the parish hall rather than the village lockup because of her health, and the gathered tenants supported him until the constable reluctantly agreed. Eleanor did not thank Julian. His costly truth gave her room to act, but it did not erase the harm that made his confession necessary. At the parish hall, Clara and Bess prepared a bed, while Mr. Spen, Heir examined Dr. Whitcomb's surviving medical papers. Eleanor laid every remaining object upon a table: the altered letter, the tonic sealed inside the wine box, the brass button, and the black chess knight. The strongest evidence had been broken or burned. Mr. Heir examined the tonic but shook his head. "Without the stock ledger, I cannot prove who prepared this, and unless Dr. Whitcomb recovers enough to testify, Seraphina will say anyone could have placed her spoon beneath the mill." Eleanor stared at the chess knight. Harcourt had taken it from Edwin, who claimed it had been found in her pocket. Yet, the piece had originally been left inside her locked ivory box by someone who knew about her pregnancy. She turned it over. A thin line of pale dust filled the carved grooves beneath its base, the same limestone mud found on Dr. Whitcomb's boots. Then she remembered something stranger. When Harcourt smashed the jar, he had immediately ground his heel over Seraphina's engraved initials. He recognized the spoon, without asking what it was or where they had found it. Only those who knew what had been hidden beneath the mill could have understood its danger. He destroyed it too quickly, Eleanor whispered. Mr. Hale looked puzzled. What do you mean? Harcourt saw a sealed jar held by Mrs. Finch. No one told him the spoon belonged to Seraphina, yet he knew the initials mattered. She lifted the Black Knight. They will deny every object we present because they control its supposed origin. So we must stop asking them to explain our evidence. Eleanor looked toward the parish hall, where tenants were gathering for the noon hearing. We will give them a false piece of evidence, something that does not exist. If Seraphina or Harcourt claims knowledge of it, they will reveal that they know exactly what was stored beneath the mill. Outside, the church bell began to ring. The creditors, constables, tenants, and Blackmere household were arriving for the public examination. Eleanor closed her hand around the chess knight. This time, we will not ask them to confess. We will force them to tell a lie that only the guilty could know. Eleanor had less than 20 minutes to prepare the trap. She sent Clara to hide the tonic inside the parish strongbox and instructed Bess to remain beside Mr. Hale until Dr. Whitcomb's surgeon arrived. Thomas and Mrs. Finch wrote separate accounts of everything they had witnessed beneath the mill, then sealed their statements before speaking to one another. Samuel Reed placed the contaminated grain sack beside the curate's lectern, guarded by 2 tenant representatives and a constable who recorded every person permitted to approach it. The black chess knight remained in Eleanor's possession. Wrapped inside the threatening note, only the altered medical letter lay openly upon the table. "What false evidence will you give them?" Mr. Hale asked. Eleanor lowered her voice. "A second spoon. We will claim that we found a gold measuring spoon, engraved with Harcourt's initials, inside a locked medicine chest. It has never existed, so no innocent person can know its shape, condition, or location. If they simply deny it, then we lose nothing. But Seraphina believes she has already destroyed the only object connecting her to the cellar. She may expose Harcourt to protect herself." The parish hall filled quickly. Displaced tenants crowded the benches in borrowed coats, while Julian's household servants stood along the walls. Harcourt sat beside his solicitor. Edwin placed the altered estate ledgers before the constables, and Seraphina wore Eleanor's household keys as if they were an official badge. Julian entered last and remained standing apart from both sides. His public confession had already travelled through Blackmere. Men who once bowed immediately now watched him in grave silence. The senior constable opened the hearing. Edwin attacked first. He described Eleanor as a desperate wife who had hidden estate losses for years and then manufactured a poisoning scheme after Julian discovered her theft. He presented the ledgers in her handwriting, the black chess pieces allegedly used to threaten tenants, and the contracts bearing her signature. When exposure became unavoidable, he concluded, Her Grace entered Harcourt property and attempted to plant objects beneath the burned mill. Her servants assaulted the company guards when challenged. It was plausible because it used fragments of truth. Eleanor had managed the accounts, kept copies outside the estate, entered the cellar, and concealed her medical condition. Each reasonable action had been rearranged until it resembled guilt. Harcourt's solicitor then presented the transfer agreement and demanded immediate recognition of the company's ownership. Seraphina spoke last. Tears brightened her eyes as she described Eleanor's supposed grief over childlessness and implied that years of disappointment had disturbed her judgment. "I never wished to replace her," she said softly. "I accepted the household keys only because Julian begged me to protect Blackmere." Eleanor rose. "Did he beg you before or after the missing rents were discovered?" Seraphina hesitated. "After, of course. Then why did you dismiss my servants and order my office papers burned before Julian announced my removal?" Clara repeated the command she had overheard. Seraphina dismissed her as a resentful servant, but Mrs. Finch confirmed finding ash and half-burned receipts inside the office hearth. Eleanor placed the altered letter beside Dr. Whitcomb's genuine treatment notes. Mr. Hale explained the differences in the quill strokes and the physician's manner of addressing her. "Who had access to his papers?" Eleanor asked. "His medical case disappeared for nearly 3 hours when Lord Edwin brought him to Blackmere yesterday," Hale replied. Edwin objected that the assistant could not prove where the case had gone. Eleanor did not argue. She moved to the loan agreement. "Julian, did you see my face when you claim I signed this?" Every person in the hall turned toward the Duke. "No," he said. "The woman was veiled." Did she speak? Only once. She said she was too unwell to remain. You told me you had gone directly from the Eastern cottages to London, Eleanor said to Serafina. Did you pass through the estate office that evening? Serafina's composure slipped. I do not remember. Eleanor produced a note from the stable register showing that Serafina's carriage had remained at Blackmere until an hour after the agreement was signed. The stable boy confirmed the entry. Julian authenticated his own choice, and nothing more. Edwin told me the veiled woman was Eleanor, he said. I chose not to ask her to uncover her face. I signed because I trusted him, and because I was ashamed to admit the estate needed her approval. Eleanor turned to the ledgers. Mr. Bell had arrived with the duplicate tenant receipts protected inside the parish strongbox. Each payment bore the tenant's mark, Mr. Bell's witness signature, and the date it had been deposited. The totals matched Eleanor's original entries, but not the altered figures Edwin presented. These copies could have been prepared later, Harcourt's solicitor argued. Not these, Mr. Bell replied. The paper carries the watermark of the Ashford mill, which closed after the flood last year. The ink was purchased from Blackmere's estate office and recorded in its supply accounts. Eleanor placed one of Edwin's ledgers beside the receipts. The altered totals were written in a darker ink, issued only 3 months ago. The theft appears to have occurred 2 years earlier, yet the evidence accusing me did not exist until this summer. A murmur passed through the tenants. Eleanor then asked Samuel to open the contaminated grain sack. Mr. Hale identified the ergot and explained how it caused the convulsions and confusion recorded among families using the Western mill. The medicine tonic contained a concentrated form of the same substance, though Hale admitted he could not identify who had prepared it without the missing stock ledger. Convenient, Serafina said. Every accusation ends where proof should begin. Not every accusation, Eleanor replied. Beneath the mill, we found 2 measuring spoons. One was silver and engraved with your initials. Harcourt destroyed it. Serafina's face remained still. A servant must have stolen it from me. The second was gold and engraved with Mr. Harcourt's initials. It was sealed inside a physician's chest behind the southern wall. Harcourt looked toward Serafina in sudden alarm. She turned upon him before Eleanor had finished speaking. You promised that chest had been removed before the fire. Silence crashed through the hall. Serafina realized her mistake and gripped the household keys until they cut into her palm. Harcourt rose. She is confused. There was no gold spoon. How do you know? Eleanor asked. Because the chest behind the southern wall contained only the certificates, the tenant notices, and the silver spoon. Harcourt stopped. He had just described the precise contents of a hidden chamber he claimed he had never entered. Edwin moved toward the door, but the tenant representatives blocked his path. Eleanor placed the black chess-knight upon the table. This piece carries limestone from the Eastern Road, where Dr. Whitcomb was restrained. It was later left inside my locked ivory box with a threat against my unborn child. The hall erupted. Julian's face went white, but Eleanor did not look at him. She faced Serafina instead. Only one question remains. Who opened the medicine room, removed the stock ledger, and prepared the tonic in Dr. Whitcomb's name? Mrs. Finch stepped forward, carrying the blue-covered book recovered from beneath the console table. The answer is written here. She placed it before Mr. Hale, who broke the housekeeper's seal and opened to the final entry. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped at a signature pressed into the paper beside the dosage order. This signature is not Dr. Whitcomb's, he said, but I know whose hand it is. Mr. Hale turned the stock ledger toward the constable. The dosage order was signed by Lady Serafina Vale. Serafina's composure vanished. That is impossible. I have never entered the medicine room. Finch pointed to the silver keys hanging from her waist. You possessed its original key from the moment His Grace transferred the household authority to you. Before that, Lord Edwin carried a duplicate. The village locksmith stepped forward from the rear of the hall. He placed his order book beside the ledger and identified Edwin's signature beneath a payment for an iron copy of the medicine room key. The date was 4 months earlier, long before Eleanor had been accused of stealing from the estate. Edwin moved toward the side door, but Thomas and the tenant representatives blocked him. Harcourt's guards did not intervene. Their employer's authority had begun to crumble beneath evidence he could no longer explain. Eleanor addressed Serafina. You ordered the tonic in Dr. Whitcomb's name, but you miscalculated the dose. The ergot weakened me without killing me, so you increased it. You cannot prove I prepared anything. No, Eleanor said. But you proved that you knew what was beneath the mill, and your signature proves that you ordered ingredients removed from the medicine room. Dr. Whitcomb discovered the altered prescription after Mr. Heir showed him the missing quantities. He came to Blackmere with my pregnancy certificate because he realized the child and I were both in danger. Julian gripped the back of a chair. Why was the child a threat? Edwin laughed bitterly. Because your heir would have ended everything. The constable ordered him to remain silent, but the scheme was already visible. Edwin's debts had placed him under Harcourt's control. As Julian's nearest male cousin, he expected influence over Blackmere if the Duke died without a child. Seraphina expected to become Julian's second wife, once Eleanor was disgraced and separated from him. Harcourt wanted the western farms, because beneath the mill ran an old canal route connecting his factories to the river. The land was worth several times the price stated in the transfer agreement. Eleanor had blocked every earlier sale by invoking her marriage settlement and exposing the company's false valuations. They required me to appear barren, dishonest, and unstable, Eleanor said. The tonic weakened me. The poisoned grain created debts among the tenants. Edwin altered their rent records and blamed the missing money upon me. Seraphina forged my signature on the loan agreement while veiled. When Dr. Whitcomb learned I carried Julian's child, they attacked him, stole the certificate, and ordered a final dose. Harcourt's face remained rigid. A compelling tale, constructed from coincidences. Then explain why the contracts in Edwin's possession granted your company the canal rights separately from the farmland. Eleanor lifted the two folded papers Edwin had emptied from his pockets at the lodge. Finch had collected them after the blood-stained button fell and sealed them with Dr. Whitcomb's medical papers. Harcourt's solicitor examined the contracts and withdrew his hand as though the pages burned. One promised Edwin 10% of the canal profits. The other guaranteed Seraphina a London residence after Eleanor's removal. Harcourt turned upon Edwin. You fool. You wrote the terms, Edwin replied, and you ordered the mill burned before Whitcomb could reveal what he found. It was not a voluntary confession, but a desperate attempt to divide blame. Harcourt answered with equal fury. The fire was necessary only because Seraphina left her spoon in the cellar. The entire hall heard them destroy one another. The constables arrested Edwin and Harcourt on suspicion of fraud, conspiracy, arson, assault, and attempted poisoning. Seraphina tried to remove the household keys before they took her, but Mrs. Finch stopped her. One by one, she detached them from Seraphina's waist and placed them upon the table. The senior constable sealed the ledgers, contracts, tonic, altered letter, contaminated grain, chess knight, and locksmith's book as evidence. Harcourt's transfer was suspended, pending investigation, and his guards were ordered from the western farms. The tenants did not cheer. Their mill was gone, their homes were damaged, and several families remained ill. Vindication could name the guilty, but it could not instantly restore what Julian's decision had allowed them to destroy. Julian stepped before the hall after the arrests. His face carried none of the authority with which he had expelled Eleanor the previous evening. The Duchess of Blackmere did not steal from this estate, he said. She preserved it while I ignored her work, doubted her character, and gave power to those who harmed her. I had opportunities to examine the truth. I refused them because protecting my pride and political standing seemed easier than trusting my wife. The forged papers deceived me, but my choices enabled the deception. He publicly withdrew every accusation and ordered copies of his statement sent to the magistrate, his solicitor, the London newspapers that had received Edwin's allegations, and every creditor connected to Blackmere. He surrendered his parliamentary position until the financial inquiry ended and pledged his unentailed London property to rebuild the mill and cottages. Eleanor listened without offering him comfort. His admission was necessary, but it did not purchase forgiveness. My pin money was seized, she said. My servants were dismissed, and my authority was used to accuse me. The Western families require protection that cannot be withdrawn when another person touches your pride. Name your terms. My mother's trust will assume permanent administration of the Western farms. Tenant leases will be protected from sale, and the rebuilt mill will be held for their benefit. Mrs. Finch, Thomas, Clara, and Bess will receive restored wages and written apologies. Hawthorne House will be transferred into my trustees' control, not merely loaned to me at your pleasure. Julian accepted every condition. And our child? His voice broke upon the final word. Eleanor rested her hand openly against the life beneath her gown. This time, no cloak concealed it. Our child will know the truth. You will provide legal recognition, security, and every protection due to the heir of Blackmere. But access to us will depend upon your conduct, not your title. Will you ever return? I do not know. He lowered his head. Then I will not ask you to decide today. 3 weeks later, Eleanor stood before the entrance of Hawthorne House. The property now belonged to her trust. The Weston families had temporary homes, and construction of their new mill had begun under her supervision. Julian arrived without servants or ceremony and handed her a sealed packet containing the completed transfer, the public corrections, and a letter. You may read it when you choose, he said, or burn it unread. Eleanor remembered the letter he had torn apart before condemning her. She accepted his without opening it. There would be no immediate return, no apology powerful enough to erase the night he had refused to listen. If a future remained between them, he would build it through years of honest action, while she remained free to refuse it. Julian stepped back and allowed her to enter the house alone. Eleanor crossed the threshold, placed the ivory box containing her restored pregnancy certificate upon the sunlit table, and closed the door with her own key.